Good day, everyone. I hope that you are in a place with stable internet connection for a clear and understandable discussion for our today's lesson. I am Rosemary Perdilla.
And I am Marinel Par, and we will discuss Chapter 5, Global Issues that Concerns Schools and Society.
For our learning outcomes, at the end of this chapter, you should be able to discuss at least two global issues in society and explain proposed solutions to the social problems.
But before that, we prepared a song related for our topic for today. Are you familiar with the song entitled Small World After All? Come and let's sing all together.
It's a world of laughter, a world of tears. It's a world of hopes and a world of fears. There's so much that we share that it's time we're aware. It's a small world after all. 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 It's a small, small world. There is just one moon and one golden sun, and a smile means friendship to everyone. Though the mountains divide and the oceans are wide, it's a small world after all. 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 It's a small, small world. It's a small world after all. It's a small world after all. It's a small world after all. It's a small, small world. It's a small world after all. It's a small world after all. It's a small world after all. It's a small, small world. It's a small,
From that song, it reflects that whenever you are, no matter how far, we are still connected and affected with each other. For example, is the recommended curriculum we had. Even not all the content of the curriculum was taught, but still, it became the basis or guide of each curriculum used. Another, the COVID-19 pandemic, which started in China last year 2019, but today, almost part of the world was affected, mainly the schools and also the society.
And now, I have here a table. The first table contains the list of top 10 world issues according to Millennials based on World Economic Forum's Global Shaper Survey 2017. The first issue is the climate change or the destruction of nature. Number 2, large-scale conflict or wars. Next is inequality or income discrimination, followed by poverty, religious conflicts, then government accountability, and transparency or corruption. The food and water security, lack of education, then safety, security, well-being, and the last but not the least is the lack of opportunity and employment. Now, let's proceed to the second table. We have the top 10 current global issues according to Chloe Turner. The first issue is the climate change, second, pollution, next is violence, then security and well-being, followed by lack of education, unemployment, government corruption, then malnourishment and hunger, followed by substance abuse, and the last in the list is terrorism. The next table contains the 17 Sustainable Development Goals for the period of 2015 to 2030. First, end poverty in all its forms everywhere. Next, end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. Next, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. Another, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote life learning opportunities for all, achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Another one, ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Also, we have build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation, reduce inequality within and among countries, and make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Another, ensure sustainable consumptions and production patterns, take urgent actions to combat climate change and its impact in line with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development, protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystem, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification and halt and reverse land degradation, and help biodiversity loss. Promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access for justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all. And the last, strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. Now, let's analyze the three tables presented.
From this table, we notice that the list in the first column is similar to the second column, but diverse in the ranking. And these issues correspond to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals for the period of 2015 to 2030, because it aims to achieve sustainable development and aids global issues cited by the two sources. Now, let's conceptualize the top 10 global issues and how they can be addressed. First, we have the climate change. Climate change describes a change in the average conditions, such as temperature and rainfall, in a region over a long period of time.
Nag-iisang Nathaniel Mangtani Cruz. Mangtani!
Salamat, Vicky. Mga kapuso, totoo at hindi po biro ang banta ng climate change o yung pangmatagalang pag-init ng temperatura at typical na climate patterns. Ito ang dahilan ng pagkakaroon ng mga bagyong gaya ng Super Typhoon Yolanda at Bagyong Ondoy. At kung hindi maabatan, pinapangambahang dadami pa ang ganito kalakas at mapamisalang bagyo dito sa bansa. Magiging mas madalas din ang La Niña o yung malalang tagulan at El Niño o yung matindi namang tagtuyot na maaaring magresulta sa kakulangan ng tubig, pinsala sa agrikultura o yung wildfire. Hindi lang yan mga kapuso, climate change rin ang dahilan sa pagkatunaw naman ng yelo dyan sa mga polar regions at yung unti-unting pagtaas ng sea level o yung tubig dagat. Tulad po ng naranasan dito sa ilang lugar sa Metro Manila, Bulacan at Cavite. Ito ang target agapan sa pulong ng mga world leader dyan sa 26th Conference of the Parties o yung COP26 sa may Glasgow, Scotland. Mga malalaki at mayayamang bansa ang may pinakamalaking kontribusyon sa climate change. Dulot po yan ng patuloy nilang pagbubuga ng carbon dioxide sa atmosphere. Pero ang mga mas maliliit na bansa, gaya ng Pilipinas, ang pinakaapektado nitong pagbabago ng klima. Kailangan
To address the said issue, the reduction of greenhouse emissions and the spreading of education on the importance of going green can help make a big difference. Lobbying governments and discussing policies to reduce the carbon emissions and encouraging reforestation is an effective way of making progress with climate change.
Second issue is the pollution. Pollution is the act of introducing harmful substances to the environment that results in harming the natural surroundings. So now, let's take a look at the situation captured in India.
These images have come to define New Delhi's pollution crisis. hundreds of devotees are taking a dip in a river covered in thick foam caused by toxic waste that flows into it every day.
It is really dirty, but what can we do? We need to do our rituals and had to do them in dirty water. We can't do this at home and have to come here for the festival.
It shouldn't be filthy, but what can we do? People who are responsible are making so much money in the name of cleaning it.
The small stretch of the Yamuna that flows through Delhi is the main source of water for the city's 20 million people. It's also one of the most polluted in the world. The government has poured billions of dollars into cleaning the Yamuna, but it's still polluted and covered in foam most of the year. It's also banned people from entering the water, sent boats to clean out the foam, and set up barricades to stop it from reaching the banks. But critics say that this has done nothing to solve the issue, and now people have come here despite the stench and the filth. Meanwhile, the air quality in one of the world's most polluted cities has plunged to its worst levels this season. Much of it has come from neighboring states, where farm fires like these have been burning for weeks. Politicians admit their strategies have had little impact. Studies say air pollution costs billions of dollars every year and is one of the leading causes of death in the city. Millions of people are struggling while the government tries to find a solution. Pavni.
The ways to prevent pollution is to practice the 3 R's: reduce, recycle, and reuse, and be responsible because the solution starts in ourselves.
Next issue is violence. Violence is an extreme form of aggression. We have various forms of violence. The first is the physical violence. It occurs when someone uses a part of their body or an object to control a person's actions. Second is the sexual violence. It occurs when a person is forced to unwillingly take part in sexual activity. Third is the emotional violence. It occurs when someone says or does something to make a person feel stupid or worthless. The next is the psychological violence. It occurs when someone uses threats and causes fear in the individual to gain control. Next is the spiritual violence. Spiritual or religious violence occurs when someone uses an individual's spiritual beliefs to manipulate, dominate, or control that person. Then, we have the cultural violence. Cultural violence occurs when an individual is harmed as a result of practices that are part of her or his culture. To address this issue, the government implemented laws. Some of these are the VAUSI or the Republic Act 9262 and Special Protection of Children Against Abuse, Exploitation, and Discrimination Act or the Republic Act 7610.
Another issue is the security and well-being. The UN is a perfect example of what should be done to prevent the lack of security and well-being a serious global issue. Through its effort with regional organizations and representatives that are skilled in security, the UN is working toward increasing the well-being of people throughout the world.
Then we have the lack of education. A lack of education can be defined as a state where people have a below average level of common knowledge about basic things that they would urgently need in their daily life. For instance, this could include basic knowledge in math, writing, spelling, and many others.
The Philippines has consistently made a significant stride in its functional literacy rate. Functional literacy, as defined by the National Statistics Authority, is the level of literacy which includes not only reading and writing, but also numeracy skills that would help people cope with daily demands of life. Based on a 2013 Functional Literacy, Education, and Mass Media Survey, the country registered a 90.3% rate, which means that 9 out of 10 Filipinos aged 10 to 64 were functionally literate.
But as of 2019, this is the functional literacy rate among Filipinos aged 10 to 64, And let's watch this
Meanwhile, the
video.
functional literacy of Filipinos ages 10 to 64 has increased to over 91% in 2019. This is according to the latest Functional Literacy, Education, and Mass Media Survey conducted by the PSA. This figure corresponds to around 73 million functionally literate Filipinos last year out of the almost 80 million in total. This is also about 4 million higher than the data recorded back in 2013. Now, those aged 20 to 24 posted the highest functional literacy at 96%, while senior citizens recorded the lowest rate at over 84%. Females are also more functionally literate in the Philippines, that's after scoring almost 3% higher than males. By region, those in Metro Manila fared better than the rest, while those in BARMM posted the lowest. Functional literacy is defined as a higher level literacy than basic literacy, which enables a person to fully and efficiently participate in common societal activities.
Another issue is unemployment, which occurs when workers who want to work are unable to find jobs, which lowers economic output. Without the necessary education, skills for employment, many people, particularly 15 to 24 years old, struggle to find jobs and create a proper living for themselves and their families. This leads to a lack of necessary resources such as enough food, clothing, transportation, and proper living conditions. Effects of unemployment. First, mental health issues, physical health issues, lower life expectancy, homelessness, drug use, poverty, social isolation, adverse effects on children, illegal activities, and economic effects. Did you know that the unemployment rate in the Philippines inched lower to 5.2% in the March quarter of 2019 from 5.3% a year ago? Unemployment rate in the Philippines averaged 8.34% from 1994 until 2019, reaching an all-time high of 13.90% in first quarter of 2000 and the record low of 4.70% in the fourth quarter of 2016.
This is SMNI News Channel. Truth that matters.
Samantala, Partner Mike, tagapulita ng balita, inaasahan ngayong buwan ang mas maraming trabaho o mababang unemployment sa gitna ng mababang alert level status sa Metro Manila at ilang pang bahagi ng bansa. Si Creseline Catarong magbabalita live. Creseline, good morning.
Good morning, Pamela.
Magandang umaga ka-partner Mike at ka-partner Jay. Nagpahayag nga ng positibong o nagbigay ng positibong pahayag ang Malacanang kaugnay dito sa huling datos ng labor force ng PSA na may kinalaman nga dito sa unemployment rate sa bansa. Sa pinakahuling datos na inilabas ng Labor Force Survey ng Philippine Statistics Authority o PSA, bagyang tumaas ang bilang ng mga walang trabaho noong Disyembre 2021. Sa ulat ng PSA, tumaas sa 6.6% ang unemployment rate noong December 2021 mula sa 6.5% na naitala noong November ng nakaraang taon din. Ito ay katumbas ng 3.27 milyong Pilipinong walang trabaho sa isay ng PSA. Pero ayon sa Malacanang, bagamat tumaas ang naitalang unemployment rate noong Disyembre, tumaas rin naman ang labor source participation. Ibig sabihin, sabi ni Acting Presidential Spokesperson at Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles, mas marami ang nagbalik sa paggawa nitong Disyembre na wala dati sa labor force.
These are the solutions for unemployment. First, better education. Next, motivation programs. Third, program against drug addiction and homelessness. Fourth, fight discrimination. Another, support programs for mental issues. Next, subsidies for companies how are reintegrating unemployed person. Another, fiscal and monetary measures in a financial crisis situation. And fight in structural unemployment. And the last is create jobs.
Government corruption is another current issue in the world. Means of corruption includes graft, bribery, embezzlement, backdoor deals, nepotism, and patronage. Corruption is a major cause of poverty, considering how it affects the poor the most, eroding political and economic development, democracy, and more. Corruption can be detrimental or can be caused to the safety and well-being of the citizens living within the corrupted vicinity, and can cause an increase in violence and physical threats without as much regulation in the government. The Philippines ranked as 94th out of 177 countries in Transparency International's 2013 Corruption Index.
Filipino health workers are some of the most sought after in the world. But in their home country, many say the government has treated them poorly and they lack some of the basic benefits and protection.
It is sad that many of us have died. Many of us become sick, and many have resigned or opted to retire early.
Nurses in the Philippines get a monthly salary of about $300 and doctors around $600. Critics argue that's too little compared to the funds that government has available, funds that are alleged to have been misappropriated during the government's awarding of multi-million-dollar contracts in its pandemic response.
Perhaps it is impossible to stop corruption in the Philippines, but we need to use a strong word like stop to protect the public funds from our dishonest and selfish government officials. Of course, there is still a number of leaders in our nation who are honest and conscientious. But with the reality that our country is facing right now, I doubt that if that country is big. Corruption is a persistent cancer that's killing our country and destroying the lives of many Filipinos. It's like a contagious disease that infects and transforms the young generation of leaders from righteous ones into wrongdoers. If this disease persists any longer, our present and future will be a big trouble.
Another is malnourishment and hunger. Malnourishment is not having enough food to develop or function normally. Malnutrition in all its forms includes undernutrition, wasting, stunting, or underweight, inadequate vitamins or minerals, overweight, obesity, and resulting diet-related non-communicable diseases. Currently, there are 795 million people who do not have enough food to eat. Long-term success to ending world hunger starts with ending poverty. By fighting poverty through proper training for employment, education, and the teaching of cooking and gardening skills, people who are suffering will be more likely to get jobs, earn enough money to buy food, and even learn how to make their own food to save money. It's hard to address malnourishment and hunger, as we are suffering from COVID-19 pandemic and scarcity of resources, as the planet creates more than enough food to meet everyone's need, but there are still millions of hungry people in the world. All we can do is to work together and help ourselves.
Substance abuse, which is the harmful or hazardous use of psychoactive substances, including alcohol and illicit drugs, according to World Health Organization. The United Nations reports that by the beginning of the 21st century, an estimated 185 million of people over the age of 15 were consuming drugs globally. The drugs most commonly used are marijuana, cocaine, alcohol, amphetamine stimulants, and opiates and violent solvents. Different abuse, and it is persistently issued throughout the world by the developing world. Marginalized groups and communities are the most vulnerable to this reality. The Philippines faces this huge problem on substance abuse.
May ilan na naitalang nasawi sa pagbabalik ng Oplan Tokhang ng PNP.
Tinatawag na ito ngayong Oplan Double Barrel Reloaded. Sa Malolos, Bulacan, 3 tulak umano ng droga ang patay matapos umanong manlaban sa mga pulis. Sa Plaridel, Bulacan naman, 1 lalaking tulak umano ng droga patay sa pamamaril ng mga di pa nakikilalang salarin. Sa Baaw, Camarines Sur, suspect sa droga sugatan matapos makipaghabulan sa mga pulis sa buy-bust operation. 11 pirasong sachet ng hinihinalang shabu ang nakuha sa kanya.
The video presented is the action by the President of the Philippines, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, in his fight against illegal drugs and other forms of criminality in the country. Last but not the least, terrorism, which is the unlawful use of force or violence against person or property to intimidate or coerce a government or its citizens to further certain political or social objectives. Terrorism is an issue throughout the world that causes fear and insecurity, violence, and death. Across the globe, terrorists attack innocent people, often without warning. This makes civilians feel defenseless in their everyday lives. Making national security a higher priority is the key in combating terrorism, as well as promoting justice in wrongdoings to illustrate the enforcement of the law and serious punishment for terror crimes. There are so many security issues that the world is facing in a global community. Let's talk about terrorism, which is defined as an act of violence to spread fear to support an ideological goal. It's something that most of us are aware of because it is the most talked about security issue in this world. Terrorist groups are not formally affiliated with a specific nation. This means that they can be very hard to track down and are able to act as outfear of national laws and often playing off the tensions of various foreign nations. Modern terrorist organizations are mostly centered on the Middle East and nations that are the one that most risk. However, terrorist groups have introduced significant threats around the world by exploiting security gaps. Nations in Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas, including the United States, have all been victims of terrorist attacks. Above all, the most current issue in the world is the COVID-19 pandemic, which started in China in the year 2019. But today, most countries around the world are infected by the said virus. Because of this virus, schools and the community was being affected. As of February 2022, the total cases in the Philippines is 3,639,942. 55,094 died and 3,508,239 have been recovered. Our government implemented lockdowns, quarantine, social health protocols, and vaccines to address this issue. But as of today, still the COVID cases rises around the world. In September 2015, the United Nations made history when 193 member states unanimously adopted 70 Sustainable Development Goals or SDGs that serve as a centerpiece of its post-2015 development agenda. The goals are no poverty, end poverty in all its forms everywhere, zero hunger, end hunger, achieve food security and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture, good health and well-being, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. Quality education, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Gender equality, achieve gender equality and promote all women and girls. Clean water and sanitation, ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Affordable and clean energy, ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Decent work and economic growth, promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Industry, innovation, and infrastructure, build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. Reduce inequalities, reduce income inequality within and among countries. Sustainable cities and communities, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. responsible consumption and production, ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. Climate action, take urgent action to combat climate change and its impact by regulating emissions and promoting developments and renewable energy. Life below water, conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. Life on land, protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification and reverse land degradation, and halt biodiversity loss. Peace, justice, and strong institutions promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Partnerships for the goals, strengthen the means of implementation, and revitalize the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development.
So now that we are done in conceptualizing the top 10 world issues, let's move on to application. First question, based on the top 10 global issues and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, choose one global issue or SDG and give suggestions on what schools must do to address the issue. Based on the top 10 global issues, we choose lack of education. Schools can create programs and researches that address this issue. Like for example, is the Curriculum Classroom by Efren Peña-Florida. It seeks to identify and understand problems encountered by learners both at home and at school to create and provide solutions responsive to their needs. The Strict Classroom has a primary goal of maintaining and or bringing learners back to formal education inside classrooms to further develop their love of country, duties of citizenship, moral character, personal discipline, and scientific, technological, and vocational efficiency. But as we have COVID-19 pandemic, schools may conduct online classes, distribute modules, and have a home visitation, as well as surveys to know why the students can go to school or get education. Through this, the school may cope up a right solution with this issue. Number 2, what moves has the Philippine government taken to ensure equitable access to education for all its citizens? So, we have public schools that is free for all. We also have projects and programs that render education to the children who live in mountains, far-flung areas, and others. Next, poverty is ranked number 4 among the top 10 issues cited by World Economic Forum's Global Shaper Survey in 2017. Education is supposed to liberate people from poverty. The Philippines has a comparatively higher literacy rate based on the literacy statistics, functional literacy, education, and mass media surveys of 2013. 96.5% of Filipinos were literate, an improvement from 95.6% in 2008. How come the Philippines has one of the highest number of educated people and yet we remain to be islands of affluence amidst a sea of poverty, meaning poverty abounds? So the question is, can this be traced to poor quality of Philippine education? Why or why not? It is because most of our educated people go to other places to work, like our teachers, nurses, doctors, and many more professionals who chooses to work abroad rather than here in the Philippines. Another, we are lack of resources. We don't have enough technology or materials to apply the learnings of those literate people. And over those literate people who graduated school, still they can't have a job as Philippines is lack of job opportunities. We also have the job switching where the work acquired are not aligned to the profession we took up in school.
Our takeaways for today. The top 10 global issues today are: first is the large-scale conflict or wars, violence, and terrorism. Second, inequality in income and discrimination. Third is poverty and unemployment.
Fourth, religious conflicts, then graft and corruption, and the food and water security or malnourishment and hunger. Then we have the lack of education, safety, security, and well-being, and lack of economic opportunity and employment, and these pollution. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals are the blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. They address the global challenges we face, including those related to poverty, inequality, climate, environmental degradation, prosperity, and peace and justice.
Let's check for understanding. List down at least 5 global issues most applicable to the Philippines. Research on Philippine laws meant to address the problem. So we have a table with 3 columns. First column, problem or the issue. Next column, Philippine law meant to address the problem. And the last column contains the specific provisions of the law. Okay, let's move on to let's reflect. So you're going to answer this question. Do I contribute to any of the global issues? Am I part of the problem? Can I be part of the solution? For the let clinchers, first question, which does not belong to the group? A. Noise pollution, B. Water pollution, C. Pesticides and fertilizers, or D. Violence? Which form of violence occurs when someone uses threats and causes fear in an individual to gain control? A. Verbal abuse, B. Psychological violence, C. Cultural violence, or letter D. Emotional violence? Number 3. Which is true of the Philippines? A. Has one of the lowest literacy rates in the world, B. Has the highest literacy rate in the world, C. Has one of the highest literacy rates in the world, or letter D. Has a lower literacy rate than Cambodia. Therefore, what does SDG 15 to 30 mean? A. Sustainable Development Goals after the MDG of 2015, B. Sustaining and developing gross national product, C. Specific development goals for all nations, or letter D. Sustaining development led by giant nations. For the last number 5, which applies to Sustainable Development Goals 2015 to 2030? A. Adopted by UN member developed nations, B. Adopted by the UN member developing nations, C. Not related to MDG 2015, or letter D. To-do list for the sake of the entire humanity.
That's all for today, and we hope you learned something. Thank you!